Papers time for you now here on the programme. Now, if you were with us yesterday, we were talking about reforms to labour laws under the new French government. Today, Dipti, they're moving on to something else, aren't they? They're talking about education this time around.
That's right. The education minister is set to present these education reforms today. And Jean-Michel Blanquer, like many of Emmanuel Macron's ministers, knows quite a thing or two about his domain. He's spent pretty much his career in the education system as a teacher and then a school official as well. And he's somebody who very much believes in a return to the fundamentals of schooling. Le Parisien newspaper says he really believes that the teacher is there to teach and the student is there to learn. So he's going to be presenting some reforms, many of them which will essentially undo the work that was done by the previous administration under François Hollande. And among those reforms, the issue of allowing students to repeat grades. Now, Le Parisien quotes the minister saying it's not normal to forbid students from repeating if that's what's needed. He adds it's absurd to allow pupils to finish their school year if they're simply lagging behind. And it's interesting because in France, repeating a school year is optional. So in other words, if a teacher suggests that a student might need to repeat, it's up to the student and the student's parents to decide if that student will actually repeat it this school year.
Now, Libération, the left-leaning paper, they're trying to get inside his head a bit, aren't they, to try and understand why he's suggesting these things.
That's right, quite literally trying to get inside his head, as you see on this front page here, inside the head of the education Minister Libé, the left-leaning paper says, with a very demonstrative front page. Among some of his other reforms, he wants to change or mix up the school rhythm, make it à la carte, if you like, or customizable. For instance, France has a very unique school system. Unlike many other countries around the world, France has a 4.5-day school week. Before 2013, that was actually a 4-day school week. It was then increased to 4.5 days under François Hollande. And now Macron's government is looking at allowing schools to decide how long they want the school week to be. So if some schools want 4.5 days, they can have that. If they want 4 days, they could have that. In other words, the government wants to give power back to schools on certain issues, in this case, the school rhythm. Now, Libération worries that Blanquer's proposals could weaken the stability of the education sector. And as I mentioned, it will essentially undo all of the previous reforms. The paper asks, how can we destroy this hard work and energy so quickly with these new proposals? And yet, according to the French business paper Les Echos, 52% of French people polled say they trust the government to reform French schooling. In particular, they like ideas like making it easier for students to repeat school years, but also imposing that homework is done at school and not at home. 48% of people say they're in favor of reinstating bilingual schools as well. And a lot of people also say they're in favor of capping classes to 12 students per class in low-income areas.
Well, Emmanuel Macron's government also being forced to defend itself in other reforms, those ones we were talking about yesterday, really, those sensitive labour reforms as well.
There's no hidden agenda. That's what the government is being forced to say, essentially, to defend its plans to lead labour reforms. The famous CDI is under question, the permanent contract. That really is the holy grail in France for getting a house, a bank account, for any sort of stability. The CDI is the norm, and it will stay the norm. That's what Muriel Pénicaud, the labour minister, has said, according to Les Echos, the business paper. But for the leader of the CGT union, one of the biggest unions in France, the government is not very transparent on the issue. According to Le Parisien newspaper, Philippe Martinez says the government is hiding its true intentions. He essentially accuses them of playing coy or keeping it sort of under wraps until the legislative elections, which begin this weekend, are over.
Yeah, well, before those legislative elections here in France, millions of UK citizens are going to head to the voting booths. In fact, polls opening 35 minutes' time today for the general election there. French papers have got quite a lot to say on the vote, haven't they?
That's right. Uncertainty, that really seems to be the word that's popping up on all the front pages. Let's look at Le Figaro. Une élection à quitte ou double. It's all or nothing for Theresa May. While L'Humanité, the communist paper, says Jeremy Corbyn's move to the left of the left, Le Cap à gauche, has thrown conservatives for a loop. Finally, La Croix, the Catholic paper, says Great Britain is full of uncertainty. The editors on the front page say it's not a united kingdom, but a divided one, where you have Northern Ireland and Scotland looking to defend their own interests as the fallout from the Brexit vote continues.
In fact, terrorism, national security, been dominating the UK vote like it did here in France. And it appears French police been left red-faced after an incident in which a passenger on a TGV train was mistaken for a terrorist.
That's right. The man was taking a train from Marseille to Paris on Wednesday afternoon when the train was stopped abruptly, and he was temporarily detained because a ticket officer had overheard him saying things like weapons in English. He was speaking very loudly. He'd locked himself in the bathroom of a train carriage. Well, it turns out that the suspect is actually a French actor. And he was rehearsing for a play. He locked himself in the bathroom so as not to disturb the other passengers. A case of mistaken identity, Stuart, but very much reflecting the world we live in, sadly.
At least everybody's listening, just in case, I suppose. Thank you very much, Tika Laurent with the papers. Next up, our focus. We head to the north of the UK. Traditional, of course, heartland for the opposition Labour territory in the UK. To find out how the party is trying to hang on to its support as Conservative candidates try to wrest it away.